Really?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Three-Body Problem here at Ekoparty Miami. I'm here with Juanito. Our guest is Aaron Portnoy. You're at a new company called Mindgard now. What is Mindgard? What are you guys doing?
At Mindgard, I'm the CPO, so I am helping define the product we create, which is an autonomous red teaming platform for AI applications.
Is it an expo?
No, Expo is more about leveraging AI to go after more traditional kind of AppSec targets. We do use AI, but our focus is a platform, kind of goes through discovery, reconnaissance, attack, defense of applications or systems that use AI specifically.
Who's your customer? A red team?
Yeah, our customer profile is internal red teams, kind of CISO level, if they want to get a higher a view of everything that's going on in their organization. Mostly working with like Fortune 200s.
It's a weird place to start, dude. Like, you want to ask him about the current thing. But this morning, we're walking past and, like, you know, we shake your hand and I'm like, oh, yeah, dude, that's Aaron. He's like, yeah, he started Pwn2Own. You know that, right? I'm like, no, I didn't fucking know that. I'm younger than you guys. I'm just kind of like, there's parts of this that I showed up and I'm like, yeah, this has been here forever. So educate us a little bit on some of the history and stuff for folks like me that are not as familiar with your background.
Oh, gosh. Where to start? Okay, so I dropped out of college and took a job with the Zero Day Initiative back in 2005, probably. Started kind of an intern, senior person on the team.
That was your first gig, ZDI?
Well, before ZDI, I actually worked at iDefense, which is where I met all the Metasploit crew and HD and Rich and like
when
all those.
Bug bounties and paying for vulnerabilities was a controversial thing, very, very controversial thing back in the days. iDefense had this
vulnerability contributor program,
VCP, correct?
Yeah, which was all about like threat intel. So that's where I met a bunch of the same crew that ended up at ZDI. Went over to ZDI. Whole like premise there was buy vulnerabilities. Don't worry about what vendor it is necessarily, as long as it's an important one. And then bake protection for those 0 days into the intrusion prevention product while the vendor was working on the patch. And that was kind of the shtick.
That was the business model, right?
Yeah. And so we would process like thousands a year. And I attribute that to why I got so good at reverse engineering, because I was looking at like every kind of target you could possibly imagine, every language or compiled languages, scripted languages, and so forth. And then, you know, we went to a lot of conferences, made friends with Dragos, who runs CanSec West, PACSec, EUSec. And I don't even remember exactly how the idea came about. It was a joint effort of Dragos and Terry Forsloth, who was our like vendor relations person at the time, and
I remember
myself and a bunch of others. And the idea was, okay, you know, we all know, our in-group, we understand that every browser is ownable. Like, we can hack them. There's always a vulnerability. There always will be a vulnerability. But we're not so sure that the general populace understands that. How can we make that clear to them? So the concept of, all right, let's go get some MacBooks or brand new hardware, put the latest and greatest whatever browser on it. We've moved into mobile devices and Teslas and all these things in years that followed. But the idea was put it out there, put a challenge out to the industry, bring your best bugs. And, you know, we saw so many at ZDI. We knew that people would show up, bring in some reporters who can translate it to the general populace and show on a yearly basis that this is still the case. The status quo is, there's always a bug.
Right.
You can't be like, oh, we're vulnerable now. No, you're always vulnerable. There'll always be a new 0 day. And the first instance of that was like a picnic table this size.
Yep.
I was the one in charge because I was the fastest at verifying on like quickly.
You were doing the triaging and verifying on your own, right?
And we needed that rapid analysis on site so that we could say, yes, this worked. So I was sent out there with, I don't know, $20,000, I think, from 3Com maybe at the time. I'm not even sure if this was after HP acquired us, but yeah, picnic table. Some folks showed up, got a lot of press, and then it just blew up from there year after year.
What's the most impressive thing you've seen at Pwn2Own in your history there?
They
were the Nils came and hit three browsers at the same time. Charlie always had an iPhone thing. Like, what was the thing that impressed you the most?
So there were various like stages of Pwn2Own. There was the individual contributor stage, the early stage.
Yeah, Dino,
one person, Dino or Sodorov or Dvorak, a bunch of people that would just show up. They had a bug, they would use it. They were an individual person who full chain, you know, soup to nuts, had the bug, exploited it. And then it graduated into this like, you know, Choki and VUPEN showed up with 6 people who just completely owned every target that existed.
Obliterated everything.
Yeah, it became like a professional, like almost like a marketing exercise.
That's right.
So we all know they're all hackable. Bringing in the VUPENs was an interesting evolution, but to me, seeing someone who was quietly confident and a badass was Nils. Only went by Nils, like, Prince. He came in and just, he was a contributor for CDI for a while, but he just showed up with some very clean, very technical exploits.
All three browsers in the same contest.
Yeah,
I remember that famous. Yeah.
What's the subtext there?
Probably a lot of things you could read into that.
Let me speak for the audience who's equally perplexed as I am, right?
Basically, just someone who was able to craft what in the exploit world is art. Like he would make very nice, very clean, very slick exploits that were very reliable, and I can appreciate that.
Right.
I mean, it's nice that you got the shell, but like how you got the shell kind of matters. That's the art. Right. That's the combination of the intellectual and the creative. So. That's what I personally appreciate.
Yeah, we also had the Pinkie Pie year as well.
Ryan's writing himself out of this story, but you were covering all these things.
Yeah,
right?
I was in the room with Aaron and for all of those things in the early days. I mean, we would just take out the room and wait to get the big story. You would pre-interview Charlie Miller and understood exactly what he was doing. Had your story pre-written and hoping that calc popped so you can have a story to write.
Hoping calc pops. That one byte doesn't get changed before you try to go in there.
I'm glad Ryan was there because you wouldn't. I mean, even to this day, you wouldn't believe how many journalists will end up with the headline, iPhone hacked in 30 seconds. And you're like, you're missing the point. Or like, yes, it took 30 seconds, but it was also 18 months of work from this person to build that in the first place.
18 months and 30 seconds to hack this iPhone.
It was also fascinating to watch Pwn2Own evolve over the years with Dino and someone showing up with a bug and an exploit to going to these full chains that required 3 or 4 things to going towards teams that now, I mean, if you look at it today now, it's like such a competitive thing with massive teams. When you look at what, and this is where the elephant in the room pops in, is this last Pwn2Own in Berlin, they were literally pushing away applicants because there was just too many submissions. Is there a lesson there between what Pwn2Own has become?
I would say that Pwn2Own accomplished its objective to get the message out that everything was hackable to the general populace. I would argue it did it some time ago.
15 years later, we don't need to start.
Yeah, we're kind of continuing to eke out some value out of that, I suppose. But I think with LLMs and the massive volume and velocity of discoveries and the capabilities, the skill gap closing, the economics are changing. I'm not sure if it has a place in the future. If it does, it's going to need to meaningfully change.
I think there's something really interesting in how both of you are discussing this right now, because I mean we can't stop talking about AI. Even if we wanted to, you can't stop talking about AI because like it just shifted the physics of the space. It shifted the way we think about things. But the way that this moment in AI is being portrayed, it's almost like that lesson that you're describing from Pwn2Own was learned, but is somehow being erased. Because when we take the premise from the frontier labs of like, yeah, these things can find ODes in anything, but they're saying, but it'll also fix everything and therefore we don't have a problem, it implies that there is still some state of unhackability that these people are also supposedly going to deliver to us. Like they're not selling themselves as like a Pez dispenser for infinite 0 days. How does it sit with you given that, what sounds like a major accomplishment in what you've built was to get that notion across that people finally fucking understood any piece of software, right? It's going to have a vuln. It is hackable by the nature of the thing. Has everything changed so much that doesn't actually apply? Or are we just kind of forgetting the thing we learned in such a hard way?
It's kind of hard to answer that succinctly and clearly. I do think
we have time, bro.
Okay, I'll try. So I think that the kind of unstated piece of it's always hackable was that there's just a dearth of bugs. They exist. Humans will find one and stop. You can only go so deep. You only have so much time. You're resource constrained. I think the idea that compute is just accelerating to the pace it is, but there's I used to say to people that would get mad at me for Pwn2Own who were on a different part of the industry, didn't want their bugs killed to go, and they get mad about it. I'd say, level up, dude. Like, get better. Like, there's plenty more there. And there always was. I think LLMs are going to change the game. I think they're going to remove, the skill gap's going to close. They're going to take out the trash, for lack of a better term, of a large amount of the space of vulnerability. Now, that being said, I also think that they are artificially limited, or I guess inherently limited, due to the fact that they are an amalgamation of some knowledge of humans that they were trained on.
Right.
They are not creative. They don't have intuition. They don't have the ineffable qualities of a human. Therefore, there are going to be things that they will not know to look for, and it's going to require human expertise to find that next type of vulnerability, the next speculative execution, the next, thing that is
class, an entire
an entire new class of vulnerabilities. So I think LLMs are the penultimate optimization of this process that we've seen play out with people, and I think that is absolutely going to change bug bounties, Pwn2Own, general code quality, but it's also going to expose where that next frontier looks,
Right.
Where it is.
What does this window look like of ferreting out all this noise and all the lessons, code bases? Is it a year out? Maybe,
Well, the problem with, I'm going to wax philosophical, but the problem with software generally is that we've been building it for I don't know how many decades. And every time what we do is we build another abstraction layer on top of another one on top of another one. So you end up with low-level stuff. You end up with compiled code, scripted code, operating systems. The browser as an operating system, Web 2, 3, 4, whatever, 0.0, JavaScript. So vulnerabilities tend to manifest, yes, inside a system, but the most interesting ones happen at the boundaries of the interaction layers between them. And so unless we burn it to the ground and build a full, formally verified, system that's mathematically proven to be secure, we're always going to have vulnerabilities. I think there's going to be major volume of change with regard to individual. Firefox is going to patch all these bugs, and so, Windows is going to patch these bugs. But these systems are composed. You're using an application in an ecosystem on a thing and relying on these libraries and on this kernel and on that firmware. And, actually to your keynote, you talked about that, like the idea that how can you even verify what is on, who owns what's the chain of trust, all these supply chain attacks that are occurring. Like there's so many different interconnected pieces that I think what we'll see is a drying up of individual targets where they, increase the hygiene, but then you're going to find all sorts of really, honestly, simple and probably stupid looking, if you put this and that together, a new vulnerability is emergent. It manifests that you wouldn't have seen individually.
Right. Mythos and the exploitation and the ability to do all of this, automate all of this is taking a lot of the headlines. But on the defensive side, do you expect the LLMs to have the same kinds of contributions to new mitigation classes, for instance? Because we're talking about LLMs being able to find new vulnerability classes, but on the mitigation side, like this is the roadblocks that we need to build. Do you think do you think it's equivalent?
No, I don't have a great reason why I don't feel that way other than intuition. I think that you're going to have this problem of, the Stack Overflow problem. Someone puts some bad code on Stack Overflow before LLM, someone repeats it, you end up with this poison bad paradigm that ends up in production code. I think LLMs are going to do the same thing with code generation. If you're looking at it from we want to defend and create a new mitigation that blocks a whole class of vulnerabilities, that's such a creative process. And some of the smartest, best hackers I've ever met who work at these major vendors that work on this stuff, it's a complex problem because it's not just what's the best technical solution. It's what's the best technical solution that doesn't impact performance, that keeps business continuity, that doesn't break this compatibility.
And that's always the problem, the cat and mouse in mitigations, right? It's if you turn it on too much, you can't get work done. And if you throttle it back too far, then it gets bypassed and then it becomes this.
Yeah. And that's the defense in depth versus we're going to fix everything. And honestly, if you're going to fix everything, just go full ham. Formal verification is mathematically proven. If you want to actually solve these problems, tacking on a mitigation that is a part of a layer cake of defense in depth, you have to accept that something's going to get through all that. You're just trying to block the 80-90% of attacks that might cause the most harm. So it really depends how people use LLMs.
I love the idea of basically understanding this as the targets are going to run, the vulns might run dry in these specific targets where the hygiene goes up, but you have emergent threats at the boundaries, at the abstraction layers. in itself, I mean, that's a fascinating insight. That's a really good way to put it. If I ask you to take me a little further and go, okay, well, when you look at these layers of abstraction, the specific ones that we're introducing now, the ones that folks are working on now, or that we're implicitly taking on now, where do you see, what is this area of emergence that we may not be paying the right attention to?
Yeah, I think so. That reminds me of this weird thing that we're seeing with LLMs. And maybe I'm going to go on a tangent here, but
do it.
Okay, if you ask the developer to write something, I have a very clear scope problem. I need this endpoint. I need this to do this thing. You can define it. In the past, you'd have a developer who would write some amount of code built on a contract that does some amount of action. Now the pattern is, well, just throw the entire some human knowledge in an LLM form at that problem. It can do it. And then you have infinite attack surface you're exposing into this tightly scoped problem. And I think if you talk about like implied relationships between functionality, I think there's a parallel there in that you're putting AI into systems that connect to other systems, and you're not doing it in a tightly scoped way. You're doing it in a very, very loosely scoped way. And we don't have frameworks, we don't have patterns, we don't have regulations or anything close enough to actually define this is exactly how this agent should act. We have guardrails, which firewalls, they don't work great. Like, it's not a great pattern. So, like, another way to think about it is the concept of CVSS scores. Like, they have value, but if you take 3 CVSS vulnerabilities that are like 5 or 6.0, most people will be like, oh, I don't care about that, I don't care about that, I don't care about that. But if you put them together, quite
you get
often,
a 10 over 10.
Yeah, you can get devastating effects by putting these various pieces together. So I think the pattern that humans tend to follow is they look at one piece of something and they try to solve that. And you see this from JavaScript developers who don't know assembly, or people who are operating at different levels of abstraction. And I think that that gets worse as new generations of technologists come into play. And that is where things will manifest, where someone is myopically focused on a solution they're trying to build without looking in context. And that's why people who have been around a bit longer, security's a hamster wheel. Like, we're going to see, okay, maybe you should consider the side effects of that action. So I think there's going to be a lot of like myopic focused solutions that don't consider full systems. And then that's where those manifested, transitive trust or emergent susceptibilities or, poorly scoped contracts between things will introduce risk.
Is this finally the end of the underscoped vulnerability assessment or pen test, right? When they say, hey,
this is out,
come here, but you can only look in this area. And like,
oh God, I thankfully I was not ever exposed to services work too heavily, because that would drive me absolutely insane. I think that's a strange way to look at risk is don't look over here. Look over here and see what you can do with this limited amount of information, whereas an attacker has no such constraints. So, yeah, I think that's going to continue because people don't understand that proper attack is holistic. That's just an unfortunate anti-pattern that I think a lot of folks are.
I'm having my hopes here. Like, if you listen to all the conversations we've been having here, like Ryan and I keep bouncing back and forth. We were calling it between two problems, because it's like Ryan and I are bouncing back and forth on this sort of implications of AI, and it's like poor unsuspecting expert is sitting between us just trying to figure out what the fuck the volleyball's doing. But the premise we keep kind of moving around is essentially like, what is the place of the human? What is the place of the AI, right? Like, what are the things, where does this take us, right? And where do we end up? And the anxiety that folks are feeling about like what their role is going to be. When you talk about things this way, right, is our role primarily in the orthogonal? Is it the idea of just, we should be the connective tissue above these slices that have now run dry? Or is that too simple? Me looking for an escape hatch, right?
No, I firmly believe there will always be a place for folks with subject matter expertise, regardless of how good AI gets, in order to see where it's going off the rails. Because at the end of the day, it is a type of mechanistic process. It is not able to have doubt necessarily, like it may appear to, and we personify this stuff a lot. But I think there's not, unless we hit like full-blown general intelligence,
Right.
if that becomes a real thing, I take all this back. But instead what we're building are, general purpose things that are fairly good at a lot of stuff, and you're going to probably see a lot of specialized AI that is very good at particular things. At the end of the day, there has to be an orchestration level. There has to be some human context about where it all fits in. I absolutely think it's going to reduce I'll call it the lesser skilled or the easier to absorb and automate parts of the job.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's plenty of historical parallels for similar things happening, and then new opportunities emerging from that point forward. So my advice would be to learn it as best you can, because it will be a force multiplier to both any work you already know how to do, but also it can help you learn the pieces that you don't necessarily know how to do, and you'll learn how to use it better with more exposure to it. But I think there'll always be a place for it.
Assuming you have the discipline to want to learn and not just have
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a core trait of a good, I'll call it a hacker or what have you, is like the drive, the ambition, the curiosity to actually learn.
Yeah.
If you stagnate, then yeah, you're going to get...
We just had this conversation about a Halvar tweet today, where Halvar is basically saying, like, listen, in reality, the last few months I've leaned in heavily to using these models and doing a lot of coding there. But now I worry that I worry about laziness creeping in. I worry about
Like losing the skill.
the skill.
Yeah, the cognitive offloading problem is a huge one. My wife works in clinical psychology, and she's like, I'm predicting now there's going to be like a rise in dementia in about 5 to 10 years where people are just going to rely on this stuff way too heavily. And yeah, they're going to lose a certain level of skill. I find myself actually having to catch myself on things and go, you know what? No, I am going to do that piece. I am going to actually not rely on you to do that for me. But at the same time, the efficiency and the amount of stuff I can get done when I lean into it is wild. Like things that it used to be that the persistence of a hacker was your superpower. It wasn't like necessarily always about skill. It was, I'm going to keep looking, I'm going to keep digging, I'm just going to push at this thing, and I'm going to push harder than anyone else because I'm going to be really persistent about it. And that was a slog. And oftentimes the thing you were looking at was not the thing you wanted to look at. It was the thing that was in your way to get you to the thing you wanted. And now you could just plug an LLM in there and just whip right past that problem. Yeah, I don't want to have to learn this new architecture to write this shellcode to get past this thing. I just really want to go find the bug over here or what have you. Now you can just zoom ahead. So in the hands of someone who knows what they want to do, as long as they are cognizant of that, like I'm going to, my skills are going to degrade if I rely on it too much, I think it's super powerful.
What was your holy shit moment of what you got an LLM to do? Like your AI...
This shit's real moment.
Is there a thing?
I don't know if I could point to any one thing. And honestly, I think the first time I was amazed by it, it wasn't even a security thing. Just the amount of, like I mentioned it in my talk, the density, the information density problem, the idea that you could throw it at some large corpus of information and get synthesized information, hopefully correct, about things is wildly helpful.
It's mine.
For so many reasons, both for exploitation, vulnerability discovery. I think in terms of security wow moments, I remember taking, a lot of people are throwing LLMs at open source. I took a binary or a large product and decompiled it into 800,000 C functions and had an LLM aggregated, give me a context, figure out the pieces of it that I needed to care about. Because in reverse engineering, I always tell people 90% of it is figuring out what parts you don't care about to get to the ones you do. Right. And an LLM just did that for me. And it's like, here are the top 10 things you actually care about. And that saved me weeks of work easily.
Right.
What's the most impressive thing you've seen someone else do with an LLM? Like some of the new blog posts we're seeing, some of the new announcements we're seeing about what people are finding and being able to exploit. Is there something that opened your eyes to holy monks?
There's honestly a lot of statistics that are kind of mind-boggling when you look at them at face value. A lot of sharp people over at Expo. I like a lot of what they've been doing. The new XM blog post that they just put out is really fascinating. Honestly, I'm a little inundated with how much is happening that's impressive that I just...
Right.
It's no longer... I'm
right?
dulled by it. I'm like, yeah, of course it did that, because why wouldn't it? So I think that's going to continue. It's only going to be optimized. It's only going to get better in that regard. I don't buy into the hype that Mythos is this super special thing. It's much better than others. I've had wildly successful bug hunting endeavors with less powerful models. But I do think it's going to continue to show up in the numbers, show up in the data. You're going to start to just continue seeing this trend of some of the graphs I showed in my talk of just like more than exponential growth in vulnerability discovery and exploitation time, mean time to respond to things. It's the first time, and I've been in security for 21 years. I think it's the first time I have ever seen a category gap change that is going to turn everything on its head.
Literally overnight.
Yeah.
We are starting to see a 10x increase in patch volumes from vendors, probably with access to Mythos and access to whatever ChatGPT offers around vulnerability discovery and the ability to push fixes. Where does that leave the rest of us trying to apply these patches and apply these fixes? Are we in a 1-year window of just hell? Because we can't patch the vulnerabilities we have now. I mean, this is the NDA problem is a serious problem. Like, where do you see things? How do you see this shaping out on operationally in organizations that need to patch all this shit?
So I talked about this in my keynote where, we have this concept of assumed breach. It's
right.
Mostly a platitude, right? What's assumed breach to you? What's assumed breach to you? How do you do it? If you actually ask organizations, 80% say they do it. 25% of the actual leaders who would be in charge of it are like, yeah, we actually kind of do it. But when attackers are going to find more vulnerabilities than is even fathomable, they're going to remain unpatched for longer because bug bounties triage times are like 10xing how long it takes them to get through stuff. Vendors or organizations barely can keep up with they're treading water in terms of own management. They're going to be drowning. I think you have to assume that the breach is happening, will be happening. And I think that's going to require a completely different, defensive technology change, not bolting AI onto it. Mm-hmm. And it's going to require a different, patching is maybe not the solution. If you're worried about AI-fueled offense, frustrating and degrading that capability may be more beneficial than patching a vulnerability.
Chasing and patching
Deception technology, adversarial environments, tar pitting, fast attacks, identifying when someone is using
network
AI.
Segmentation, the kind of like the things Dino has been pushing, which is like rewrite your entire thing from scratch so that things don't touch each other. Like, this is the only way. You can't patch it.
Yeah, there's the blast radius, there's the containment problem, but I also think you're going to just see AI fueling everything. And the interesting thing about AI is it has a reward loop. That reward loop is something you can manipulate. It is mathematically trying to solve some, reward system success criteria that it has. As a defender, if your environment is feeding that gradient, you can steer it off course and into a deceptive technology, into a playground where it's going to waste time and you collect threat intel. Mm-hmm. I think frustrating these attackers that are going to try to attack at scale and just throw these autonomous agents at many organizations, they're not going to spend time on you unless you're state sponsored when you are causing them to eat tokens, waste time, not get results. I think that's going to end up being more effective than whack-a-mole with vulnerabilities.
I mean, you mentioned your keynote several times, and Ryan and I, of course, didn't make it this morning. So can you give us like the takeaway, right? Like the big picture of what you're trying to drive at?
Yeah, I'll try. It was I like to
do
think
the keynote.
Do it again.
It was pretty dense. So I'll try to say a couple things. One, Lockheed's kill chain, old paradigm. New one, a lot more internalized, a lot different way that you need to think about it. Second point I'd say is
feel free to spend time spelling it out.
If you have time, we have time.
Our audience is listening to 3-hour episodes. It's all good.
Yeah. So Ryan peed right before this, so we're good.
So I think the key point was that there's a number of compounding asymmetries that are going to favor offense right now. They have to do with the ability to change how attacks operate, to push your command and control. You don't have an operator in the loop. You can push command control. You can push development in situ. You can have your malware is no longer a binary PE or an executable or a ELF file. It's a prompt. Mm-hmm. If you have GPUs inside of your target that you can leverage to develop your implant, it's emergent. It shows up in the environment where defenders are over here watching a border. Right. It's going to move faster. It's going to have I call it a legato rhythm instead of a staccato, right? Instead of this burst, rest, burst pattern, you're just going to have this like sustained rhythm of attack. You're going to have, so many things that defense is just not designed for. So I make the argument that SOC tooling, defensive technology, is very it needs correlation. It needs deductive reasoning about what happened. But when you have internalized reasoning, even the frontier labs don't have mechanistic interpretability, meaning they don't know why it may have made a particular. They don't have a debugger to go see why the LLM made a decision. If you're having to respond to a cyber insurance policy or regulator, compliance, and you can't answer what happened and why exactly, you're only looking at artifacts of consequences, then you're kind of screwed. So there's this like Bayesian distribution of probabilities of what it might have done. It's making it very difficult for defenders. So I make the case that offense is in a place that defense cannot reckon with right now. And we're in this weird liminal space between old defensive tech that was arguably not doing the best job at defending the threats of yesterday.
Generous.
Talk your shit.
Yeah. I mean, you did a much more thorough job in your talk. But and then this, whatever the new defense is going to look like. So I make the argument that security is a turn-based game. Offense has just made their move. What is defense going to do? And then I talk about what I think an AI-fueled attacker could look like and how you might actually catch them. So or manipulate them. So that's all sorts.
So give me an answer to the question. What does defense do?
I think defense needs to stop. From an abstract sense, they're very heuristic focused. What's the artifact? What did it do on disk? What did it do on the wire? What is it doing in memory? I think they need to move toward a cognition-focused way of thinking about it. How is it behaving? What actions is it taking? What is it? How can it's almost like an anomaly detection in some sense. And then how can you influence that to degrade their operations? So I put it in the form of systems theory argument, which is like places to intervene.
Man smiling over here.
Like places to intervene in a system. So there's a paper from Donella Meadows, 97, 12 places to intervene in a system. And she talks about, you can make changes in the system, you can make changes to the system, and you can transcend the system and make kind of higher level abstract changes. And I think what defense needs to do is move up that ladder, because offense just like transcended the paradigm. And defense is over here like, well, I'm going to bolt AI onto a firewall and that'll do it. And you're like, no, your SOC tooling is a forensic historian at this point. Like it's already happened. It happened in 10 seconds. You're ingesting the first event and it's already happened. You're essentially an archaeologist. Like it needs to be reimagined entirely.
I'm pretty happy to hearing this, right? Because you mentioned Donella Meadows, right? And I pushed at my LabsCon keynote this year. I literally was like, "Go read her book! Like it's just like it's free. Like please, people read about systems thinking and sort of this broader cybernetics theory that's really guiding what we're doing." If you heard, me bitching as much as I was, it is that frustration of looking at the defense space and saying, it can't be that the only thing we're coming up with is the same fucking 6 product categories, but we bolted AI on top, right? Like that cannot be it. It just to kind of push the point, right? You mentioned something about like emergent implants. And what I wrote down, I'm like, what's the hash on that? You know what I mean? Like, what the fuck is the artifact, right? The thing is being materialized in front of you. It's fascinating, man. And I really appreciate that. I don't know that any of us are making appropriate moves. Like, do you feel like there's any part of that defensive space that has kind of risen to meet the need?
Unfortunately, so like I mentioned to others earlier today that I walk the floor at RSA. Oh, it's just aisle upon aisle of carnival barkers going, hey, look at our AI defense. It'll stop everything. And you peek under the hood, you look behind the curtain, and it's a heuristic technology with a little bit of AI copilot added on top. And I have no faith in that working. The only stuff that gives me any even shred of hope that I've seen is there are people talking about deceptive technology. Mm-hmm. And that has existed in the past in the form of like honey pots and things like that. Right. But I think this idea that you can hijack the reward loop of automated AI-based attack combined with an adversarial deceptive technology, like I do think that has some promise. And humans won't necessarily be so susceptible to it, but it sure lets you divert this flood of AI-based automated at-scale attacks.
Right. I mean, the whole premise of deceptive technologies, when they were heavily pitched, which is, I want to say like 5-7 years ago, like when it was like very popular, and I don't know, my sense of time is pretty off. But I felt like the limitation was really the generation of the thing, right? Like you're telling me we're going to create this deceptive sandbox environment. Like, it's going to look like our thing. It's going to be credible. It's going to have data in it. It's going to be populated as if users were. We're like, who the fuck is going to make that? Who's going to convincingly maintain that, right?
But it exists now. I know from firsthand experience. I went after a Perplexity product, and I was basically just middlemaning an LLM I was using against the target, and it took me an embarrassing amount of time to realize that it was completely fabricating an environment that I thought I had a shell on. And I mean, I was checking like hardware, like clock timers, like proc file system, like very specific stuff. And it took me to the point where I was like ready to file a bug bounty report on a thing I found. And I'm like, wait a minute, is that actually real? And it wasted my time. And transitively, it was wasting an LLM's time. So if that were an automated attack, it would actually work. So it was generating that and maintaining the context, making it real and continuous and coherent over time. So I think you're right. Like, with LLM's ability to do what they do very well, generate, we no longer have that limitation of, how can I make it realistic? No, an LLM can absolutely do that now.
Just here to burn your tokens. Yep. Literally. Well, we keep talking about, upping the cost of attack, right? I can literally up the cost of attack at this point, given the premise that you're providing.
You can do it via, wasting their time in a reconnaissance endeavor. You can do it from, you're going to scrape our Google Drive, our corporate Google Drive? Well, great. We've just it's chock full of prompt injections and bullshit data that you're going to have to go and churn through. Like, there's many ways to make an attacker frustrated. Mm-hmm. And because AI is so fast and you can corrupt its reward loop, that'll get out of hand really fast. Right? Like, they're going to try to attack you really quickly, and if you hijack it and you make them do a bunch of unnecessary things, they're going to look at their little dashboard of how much it costs them to run that attack. Like, let's kill that one. I don't want to mess with that, spiky.
What kind of fucking like recursive, matrix-like hell are we talking about? Where I think I have a shell and I'm just talking to an LLM acting as a shell. All right, I'm going to sit with that one.
Yeah. Dude, we have APT subverting math. At some point, this has to be the model, right? Aaron, thank you very much for coming on, speaking the breeze with us. We usually close the show with some shout-outs. You got any shout-outs to give to any folks? Is he doing anything interesting?
Just my team at Mindgard. They're doing a lot of cool stuff. Really, they helped me a lot with formalizing, synthesizing all the ideas for the keynote. And obviously, everyone here at Ekoparty. I've been coming for like 17 years to this conference, so it's great to see it here in the U.S.
Yeah, I think Fetty was mentioning that you were an integral part of like them getting set up as a deep community. What is your connection to Argentina?
Oh God, that story. Okay, so I went down to Dragos, ran a conference called BA-Con in 2000. Oh God,
Bacon.
Yeah,
really?
BA.
Wow.
Wow. So I went down there for that to present some work. Met Fede. Fell in love with the culture and like all the,
Could you not? Yeah.
Fede does that.
I grew up with Hera's like advanced buffer overflows and core versus immunity versus Metasploit, like that whole era. So made best friends with Fede, and I was in charge of ZDI, and we would spend $80,000 every year at Black Hat to rent out like the Hard Rock for an event.
Yes.
And I was like, why are we doing that? Black Hat's getting increasingly corporate. Like, that's not who we, as researchers, are trying to reach out to. Mm-hmm. So I made the case. I went back to home, and I said, hey, instead of giving me $80,000, I said, give me $25,000 to go down to Argentina and sponsor Ekoparty, which goes a long way in South America compared to Vegas.
Right.
So, yeah, you can't just wire that money to Argentina easily, or couldn't at the time. So they made me go to a Walmart in my local town to the MoneyGram and put a form in for $25,000. And I remember the woman behind the counter.
This wasn't a scam, right?
No, this was. So the woman takes the form. She looks at the number. She looks at me. She looks at the number. She turns around to her colleague and shouts in the middle of a Walmart, "I'm going to need a fat stack." And I'm standing there like, you're painting a bullseye on my back right now. I'm going to have to walk out with $25,000 in my pocket through this parking lot. Then I ended up carrying that down to Argentina and doing, sponsoring Ekoparty, which I think...
Taping it onto your stomach and getting through customs, right?
Driving through on a moped to give it to blue market stuff. But it worked out really well. It helped give them resources to upgrade the conference, and it exploded. I mean, it was not huge at the time, but they're quite large down there now, and it's been
thousands and thousands of registrations.
I mean, come on, $25,000 at dollar blue exchanges to a conference in Latin America is insane, right?
It's the same thing you've been talking about. Like, why aren't VCs not spending 100 million on some of these shit companies we've seen at RSA? Go take 20 million down there and find some talent to do interesting things.
Start
The
10
same-
fucking
it's the
conferences.
same thing he did 10 years ago, 20 years ago.
Yep.
Appreciate the time, man.
Yeah.
Love to
Good talking
have
to you guys.
Thank you, brother.